being a refugee should not define anyone who is in Kakuma or in Calabea. It is the hope and it's the ingenuity that people bring to that situation.
Being all in, it's a kind of a conscious choice, not just doing what you can, but really committing to doing whatever it takes.
Artists keep getting pushed out of the conversation on peace building and hope building and trust building. You know, Sudan's problem is not just war, Sudan's problem is a trust problem.
We are already all in. We're here. We believe and we're part of a story. But what else we can do through our actions and our words to shift that mindset.
Hello and welcome to State of Africa. I'm Jeff Morton with the Africa Leadership and Dialogue Institute. Now, with $82 billion in spending power and over 22 million people poised to join the workforce, Africa's displaced communities represent an untapped economic force. We were on the ground at the Africa Forum on Displacement 2025, a gathering hosted by the Amphora Coalition, Inkomoko, and UNHCR that brought together private sector leaders committed to driving social impact on the African continent. Now, we begin with a powerful conversation featuring the President and CEO of MasterCard Foundation, Rita Roy, UNHCR Deputy High Commissioner Kelly Clements, and Isaac Fokuo Jr., founder of the Amphora Coalition. Let's listen in.
It is my great honor to join you today during this important edition by the delegation from the African Forced Displacement Forum 2025. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome you all to Kakuma refugee camp.
I think this is one of probably the most important parts of this week, which is just being here, listening, immersing ourselves, engaging, learning, and thinking about how we're going to act.
I was just in the US and I was talking about Kakuma. And I was saying how just incredibly vibrant this community is. Why Kakuma is Kakuma today is first and foremost because of the ingenuity and determination of the people who live here. Right? It's refugees and the hosts finding solutions to their community's most pressing problems.
Clean and sustainable way of cooking.
That's exactly the solution that we are bringing, and this product you see here were made here
in Kakuma, made in Kakuma.
Hiyo wakati biashara imeatua 2020, nilikuwa na duka pale hapo opposite police. Kaona nafasi ni kidogo, kabidi ngawacha huko, bado kazi inafanyika hapo. Kuna duka pamoja na hotel. Alafu wakati supporter imeanza kuja, kaanza kutupatia loan kwa Inkomoko, kajenga nafasi hapa. Niko na space nyuma store. Alafu tukaendelea biashara polepole mpaka sasa hivi.
Cloud, mimi nasema asante sana. Kwa nini? Unauza product zangu. Product yangu ni hiyo Amara. So nimesema asante na tutaongea, tuta exchange numbers, ndio utaniambia hile usaidizi unahitaji ndio tu skume Amara iendelee.
We go into this forum that is all in shaping the future of inclusive growth. We can see not only different lives changed, but we can see economies driven, and we can see ideas flourish, and we can see solutions.
All in! All in! All in! All in! Okay, thank you.
Everyone in this room is committed to something very special. And that trust, there's a big trust deficit when it comes to conversations. And every time we get together, every time we have these cocktails, every time we have these networking events, that's what we're doing. Now, what does trust have to do with these two amazing leaders on this stage, you ask? You know, 2021, when we started AFD, 2019, we were talking about AFD. We went to GRF in Geneva. Julian, Nancy, and I were there, and a few others. We met Karen and a few people from the foundation. And this idea started percolating. We had no idea what this would look like. We had no clue. So we said, well, GRF is okay, but we're gonna do something in Africa. Okay, do something in Africa. And we sort of bounced ideas around. And then 2021, we're gonna do something in Africa. And then COVID hit. The week of Omicron, we had the last flight from South Africa brought our final delegates. Leanne couldn't make the flight. She was supposed to come and she couldn't make it. Right? But trust. UNHCR, Kelly showed up. MasterCard Foundation showed up because they trusted the idea. And I think trust is so important. And when leaders provide trust and give trust into an idea, wonderful things happen. And I need to acknowledge that because it's so important. And I think everyone in this room, we have to trust intent. We have to trust what we're doing here. We have to trust the journey. Because without that, it doesn't matter. So the first thing I want to do is acknowledge the two of you for the trust you've given us. I want to acknowledge the fact that you showed up. I want to acknowledge the fact that you trusted when we had no idea what we're doing. We still don't know what we're doing. But you trusted it. I'm going to start with Rita. What stories or realities have reshaped your understanding of resilience?
There's a displacement also psychologically and a displacement emotionally, being in that place and being in Kakuma and at the same time being surrounded by wonderful people who have come with such love and care and curiosity. What struck me listening to the young people, the businesses we saw, doing some shopping, heavy duty shopping and buying some beautiful baskets from the artisans, is that this could have been anywhere. We met young people with huge insights who are already translating them into businesses. They're supporting their families, supporting themselves. They're hiring others from the host community and from the settlement. They could have been anywhere, world class, in the kinds of drive and the ingenuity that they were putting forward. And it only reinforced to me one of the biggest barriers, which is still out there, which we need to address, which is invisible, but follows us, is that term, refugee or displacement, and the barriers, mental barriers that it creates in the mindsets of others. And so it was incumbent, I just felt it's incumbent on all of us. We are already all in, we're here. And we know, we've seen, we believe, and we're part of a story. But what else we can do through our actions and our words to shift that mindset. That negative mindset can unlock so much more. And what I saw was just hope, energy, optimism. There was heat, but there's also good heat, yeah, in all the conversations that we had. So I thank you.
Thank you so much. It's interesting because I think one of the things that we talk about in Amphora is people always say, we're trying to empower people. And I said, no, we're not empowering anybody. What we are doing is just sharing their journey. Because folks, I mean, you heard Delene, you heard Oriane, you heard Dr. Barakat. I don't need to empower Delene. She's already empowered. I just want to share her journey. I want some data part of her story. And it's so insightful when you talk about that, when you were in Kakuma, realizing that you could be anywhere and having a conversation with anyone, anywhere. And I think that's such an interesting thing. Kelly, from your standpoint, I guess you travel to a lot of places. You wear a big hat. Displacement numbers are growing, over 100 million, 45 million in Africa and growing. What are some of the most pressing challenges facing refugees today, especially within the context of shrinking budgets? We all know what's happening.
Oh, Isaac, we go from the hope and the joy, bringing the house down. No, in all seriousness, first, good morning to everybody. It is an absolute delight to be back with you and to echo the words, we have really trusted partners in this room who really, to use Leanne's term and the term of today, it's true, Rita, all of us are all in. And I think our goal is to make this room a whole lot bigger. We had our High Commissioner, Filippo Grandi, speak to world leaders. He was at the UN Security Council. And it was his opportunity to basically put some pressure on world leaders to make some progress on peace. And this is what is failing at the moment, unfortunately, which is why we see so many people displaced around the globe. And I've unfortunately said it too many times in the last months, but I don't think that there's a corner of our globe right now that isn't burning. And so you have a scenario where, of course, we want to find the ultimate solution. We want people to be able to live peaceably in their own communities. We want people to be respected for who they are. We want people to be valued and included, and societies to thrive and prosper, and people not to feel like they are in fear of persecution or they're in fear of their lives because the bombs are falling. And you hear those stories of those that have survived really incredible, incredible events, lost family members, lost possessions, lost businesses. But then out of that, I want to come back, in terms of what we see today and why today is so important and this gathering is so important. Because on the public side and those world leaders, they're not necessarily doing their jobs. They're not finding the peace. They're leaving that then to the individuals. They're leaving that then to those of us who are trying to work to provide those that know the journey they want to take and accompanying them on it. And yes, indeed, there are not enough resources to go around to those 123 million people and the many host communities that also share of themselves and share their own very, in some ways, meager means in order to help people get back up on their feet, to provide them safety, to provide them a chance, to provide them an opportunity. But I want to come back. I think, in terms of the biggest challenges, it is to bring the little spotlight we had yesterday in Kakuma, and like Rita, not my first visit, but I was recalling yesterday, I lived last in Kenya in 1989 and 1990. I think that was 1 year before Kakuma started as a camp. That's not right, to have that many years, 34 years go by, and to get what Delene just mentioned, the being a refugee should not define anyone who is in Kakuma or in Calabea. It is the potential, it is the hope, and it's the ingenuity that people bring to that situation that we need. The challenge is to get that kind of message out, because it's unfortunately too easy to think about the despair, and our job is to talk about the hope and the opportunity despite the despair. And I think that is on full display, including in this room, including what we saw yesterday, and frankly, we need to overcome the challenges with the opportunities.
Thank you so much. And maybe a follow-up question. So yesterday, to your point, about 30 business leaders were with us to Kakuma. UNHCR has been leaning in quite heavily into the private sector and sort of to address some of those issues, especially since from world leaders are not resource trapped, but also in some cases, as you mentioned, just not doing enough. I guess what are some promising examples of what the private sector is doing that you've observed or that you see that would be helpful for this audience as we have more private sector actors in this room that they could either emulate or see as best practice?
No, we're sitting here in Kenya, and others later today will talk a little bit about how special this country is and some of the very courageous moves that have been taken of late, including what many of you know about and have heard about, which is Sharika, the Sharika plan, the way to include, the way to change, laws, policies, and the like, so that refugees can be included and integrated, and to help to drive Kenya's economy. This is, I think, it's an important moment because it is not just public. It's not just governments. It's not just organizations like myself or with UNHCR or the NGOs that we work with across the globe, but it is also the private sector that then can help us with the expertise, the knowledge, the know-how, and the ability then to be able to scale up these innovations. I'm sitting next to one of them that is one of the primary innovators, but I also am in the room with another who used to represent the IKEA Foundation. And the IKEA Foundation took a chance on UNHCR many years ago. And one particular place, I'm referring to Per Hegenes here, who's the former CEO of the IKEA Foundation, and in Ethiopia, looking at ways where you can take a progressive government policy, or the potential for a progressive government policy, in this case, identifying land that Ethiopians and Somali refugees can work together, grow crops, link it to an energy infrastructure and to education, because none of these things come in isolation. And then to be able to scale that on a size that it then makes it sustainable for Ethiopian host communities and for refugees. This is something that this could work anywhere in the world. I know we'll talk a little bit in a minute with Rita about what MasterCard Foundation has done, but again, we can help with governments, and we can help in emergency situations to try to keep education going or establish education. It is much more difficult to see this unless you really invest in the national services, in the Ministry of Education, in some of these areas, to not only make education accessible, but also for youth to complete education and then to have a path to go into a way to support themselves. This is not possible, again, without the private sector helping us be able to scale that kind of opportunity. We've one last example, perhaps. You know, this world is a very connected one. There are still way too many refugees and internally displaced that are not connected, that are not on grids, they do not have the technology or the regulatory framework that allows them to connect. We know in this world that is the key to success. That is the key to being able to drive local communities and national and global communities. And so to try to connect, we've had partners like Vodafone try to connect through instant network education, students that may be a little bit off that grid but should be connected. And this is only possible with the private sector.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And I think for those people who ask questions, what can I do? How can the private sector get involved? Here are some real tangible examples and solid examples on what you can look at as a template as you do your work. Rita, if I may come back to you, the MasterCard Foundation has focused on young people, and that's a wonderful thing, and providing dignified jobs for young people across the African continent. I guess my question to you is that in your work, in the time of your work, what are some of the unique barriers to economic opportunity that young people are facing? And especially people who are in displaced areas. And what are some ideas, so how can partnership like yours bridge that gap, that delta between folks who have jobs and how they get into the job market?
Thank you. I think partnerships are the only way to bridge the gap, but not just bridge the gap, but also create pathways to huge opportunity. It's just partnership, and it's partnership of a varied kind and a diverse kind. Partnerships between foundations, partnerships between the private sector, partnerships with organizations like UNHCR and several of our partners who are here. It's also partnerships with government. And I think all partnerships, good partnerships, begin by listening. And by listening, by understanding, by engaging, by being curious, by asking questions to only deepen understanding about how we can be called to action and what we can do. The barriers are known in terms of access to education, access to capital, access to mentors, access to markets. These are all barriers where there can be workarounds, where it's a design solution, but the keys to parts of that design are held by different parts of this whole ecosystem we're in. And so partnership is really, really key. And one other piece about partnership is being able to use that word trust. We heard that several times today. Trust young people, listen to them, don't speak for them, follow their lead, create spaces for their voices to be heard, their ideas to rise, so that we can get behind them. That's a critical part of partnership.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Kelly, Rita mentioned listening, and you just gave some good examples of private sector partnerships and how it's working. What is not working? Where do we get it wrong as private sector?
Good question, Isaac. Sometimes I think it gets a little bit to what Rita just said in terms of listening. Sometimes we design the solution without knowing what the problem is. Or, as we noted yesterday, which I found it a very interesting dynamic, Leanne described this a little bit. You had the tables of us starting to talk amongst private sector organizations and so on. Oh, we've got a challenge on our hands. Let's figure out how we solve it. And then the dynamic changed as, of course, the VVIPs, those that are there and living and breathing what they need in terms of their futures, then they join the table, and the entire dynamic then changed. It is, I would say, one of the big challenges for us is trying to sometimes fit that square peg in a round hole. That we have so many brilliant minds in the business world that might have just the right thing, but it might not be the right solution. So I think part of our challenge is to get more of these networks together, and this is what has been so remarkable over the last few years, particularly with this forum, is that those coalitions are building. Even yesterday, we had more discussions about what new coalitions, or how can we build current smaller coalitions into massive ones to try to scale. And so I think that's the issue. It's one, keeping the interest on the table, and two, how does that fit work in just the right way, having the people's voice guide the solution. And I think that's probably one of our big challenges.
Couldn't agree more. And I think one of the things also sometimes that happens is that private sector actors can have this illusion that we have the solutions because we're private sector, and listening and don't fit square pegs in one hole. I think is great advice. Rita, if I may, I want to throw this last question to you. The Mastercard Foundation continues to partner with organizations to drive, we talked about this earlier, educational work opportunities for younger RDPs. You've talked a lot about partnerships, you talked a lot about having to work together. I guess what are some examples in your view of what's working, and how do we really build scale? Baraka just told us that we're not doing enough. So how do we scale some of these solutions to actually create greater prosperity for everyone?
Okay, great. Thank you so much. We have been on this journey for a while, just over a decade, and I want to just put a couple things of context right here. The Foundation's vision is obviously a world where all have the opportunity to learn and prosper, and the underscore is on all, which is really about inclusion and being all in. We've been on a journey where we've put out a strategy, I'd say almost 5-6 years ago now. It's called Young Africa Works, and we put out a bold, ambitious goal of 30 million young people in dignified work, dignified and fulfilling work. And when we got on that journey, people said, how are you going to get there? What are you going to do? And we didn't have the answers, but we knew that the answers would come through partnership. Despite COVID, despite being knocked around a few times, we're halfway there, and we're more than halfway towards that goal. And this work, this forum, our partnerships with many organizations in this room are part of that journey, part of that success, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to call out UNHCR. We've been working with UNHCR since 2019. You've been an incredible thought partner. You've challenged us. You've brought strategic insight, and you've been a program partner. And just over a year ago, one of the more recent engagements was in Sudan, to really help young people, especially young girls, return to school, and to help young people build their livelihoods. And in a very, very short period of time, I'm talking about 6 months, we saw the return of 30,000 young people to education, and 68,000 young people starting to earn a living and to make their way. That's the kind of impact we're interested in scaling. Yeah? And that is thanks to UNHCR, thanks to many other partners who work with you, many of the refugee-led organizations who are part of the fabric of delivery and who are right on the front lines. So today what I wanted to share is that we wanted to scale this work. We want to scale this work. We want to take it to at least 500,000 young people returning to school, accessing secondary education, and if not, go further. Not just secondary education, but also to enable young people, thousands of young people, to complete tertiary education, whether it's in university, whether it's in vocational education, but to complete that education. We know, again, the only way this can be done is through partnership, but partnership with the VVIPs, the folks who have the real insight, the African organizations, the organizations led by refugees. And so we expect at least 100 of these organizations will be part of this scale-up as we go forward. And of course, the role of policy and government. Government with very specific interventions, the boldness of the Sharika initiative here, similar policy initiatives elsewhere, can turbocharge and just create the right kind of partnership.
One thing is definitely clear. While funding matters, it's people and their passion that truly drive change. You're watching State of Africa. We'll take a short break now. When we come back, we'll tell you how private sector leaders from Sudan came together to discuss what leadership looks like in times of crisis. Do stay with us. Welcome back to State of Africa. Now, the crisis in Sudan has displaced nearly a third of its population. As the conflict enters its second year, the human and economic toll continues to mount. But just how should leadership look like in times of crisis? Private sector leaders from Sudan came together to discuss that and more.
To yet another critical and crucial discussion as we deep dive in what all in really means in the real terms, on the ground, as Kenyans would say, qua ground. What does that look like? What is the role of private sector in rebuilding economies? Because we must go on. Sometimes we don't have the option to stop. Livelihoods must continue. Healthcare must be provided. Food must be provided. Children must be taken care of. We don't have the choice to leave. So what does it take for us as private sector to rebuild these economies amidst the forced displacement that we see and the ongoing conflict that we see in our country, Sudan? With me on the panel today, and I'll allow them to introduce themselves, is a group of what I call outliers, outstanding leaders in their respective sectors who will unpack this conversation with us. I want to point out that all of us have something in common, different as we look. We have all lived the reality of displacement. If I speak for myself, I'm a child of refugee parents. My father immigrated from Rwanda into Uganda and later on found themselves in Kenya. My mother was a refugee out of Uganda in Kenya. Kenya is my home. It's the home that I've known. But there's a lot that has come with that. There's a lot of compromises that we have to make. But for whatever it is that it has taken for us to show up here, and each of us has our individual stories, we then become also a different type of leader. How we show up is not the same. And maybe that's what we need to harness. The three of us are in private sector, and we're going to discuss what it has taken for us to be where we are, how we're showing up differently, and what is it that fuels us to go on in spite the circumstance. We are going to be discussing what it takes for us to keep the hope alive. We've talked about this hope. Hope is a reality on the ground. What does it take to truly say, I'm not giving up? We're going to discuss our hope for not only keeping things going, but also continuity for the sense of normalcy. It might not look the same way as it looked before the war, but there's a new norm that we are forced to recreate for our people and for ourselves. We're going to talk about what it takes to create a hope for a brighter future, because in spite of this disruption, you're still the same individual that is ambitious and wants to change and achieve great things. So what does it take to maintain that hope for a brighter future and to believe that we can empower ourselves as a people and refuse to give up to what our situation actually calls us to be? So day by day, we are creating new realities, and that's what this conversation is about, and we are all in, literally. So allow me to start by asking remarkable leaders on this particular panel, and I'll start with you, Islam El-Beiti, and I'll introduce myself last. Islam is a force, a musician, a cultural activist, and an advocate. Please introduce yourself as only you can, and tell us what has been the snapshot of your personal journey to date.
First of all, I am the partnerships manager for the Cash Consortium of Sudan, focusing on supporting Sudanese NGOs within the cash distribution and humanitarian assistance. I also am a bass player, incredible. If you guys get to catch me play live, please, you should come. A lot of our music focuses on highlighting Sudanese funk, jazz, a lot of the really cool things about Sudan that most of you probably don't know because all you hear is just heartbreaking things. But Sudanese culture and art is probably one of the most powerful things in the world. I'm the eldest of 5. I have incredible siblings and parents. And at the time of the war, I was in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and my whole family was in Sudan. So of course, waking up on like that Saturday, I was like, what is going on? Our country's falling apart. It's not possible. It's gonna end in 2 days. Next thing you know, it's 2 years later. So that whole experience of me being outside of Sudan while my family was internally displaced we'll talk about that later as well. Other than that, we support a lot of Sudanese creatives and young artists who are displaced in Nairobi or in Kampala to give them access to just like writing classes, painting classes, you know, come through, let's talk, let's share our stories. And I remember telling my little sister, you know, you guys should do a podcast and talk about your experience of leaving Sudan. And she's like, Islam, everybody asks us about how we left Sudan. But I want to ask my friends what their grandmother used to sing for them in the morning, what their grandmother used to feed them, the stories that were being shared. So I think the perspective of younger Sudanese from the age of 10 to 12 will fascinate you, the level of wisdom they have. Anyways, I can go on forever, but it's very nice to be here. Thank you guys so much for hosting this space.
Thank you, Islam, and a warm welcome. I'll go over to my colleague and my brother, Ahmed Amin Abdel Latif, President of the CTC Group, the Sudan's largest agribusiness. Please be humble enough to introduce yourself in the reality of what you've lived through, what it has meant for you, especially from a personal journey perspective, before we go later on in what it means from a business perspective.
Up until April 2023, I had lived basically all my 50 years in Sudan, except for a 5-year break in between while studying. 30 of these years, I worked for CTC Group, a large private sector involved primarily in the agricultural sector. And in addition to being basically president of the group, I thought I was, you know, quite engaged in terms of civil society work, a lot of outreach work, et cetera, et cetera. So I thought I was doing quite a lot. I thought I was doing great. Saturday morning, 15th April 2023, you hear that there are, you know, some disturbances in Khartoum. It's a weekend, so I said I'll go to the office a bit later. No need to rush things. Never ever saw the office again. And so, initial days, as you said, Sylvia, were really all about safety, security, family, immediate family, extended family. In my case, family includes also a few thousand, you know, employees at CTC Group who we do genuinely consider to be family. And so the first couple of weeks were really all about that, making sure that people were safe, people were secure. Business, I think, was completely sidelined at that time. I think I was extremely lucky, extremely fortunate. So I was in Khartoum with my wife, with my 2 daughters and son at home when the war started. And very lucky, very fortunate that we made it out to safety within about a week or 10 days of the start of the war. I think one of the most poignant moments for me was my 12-year-old daughter, Layla, who had never ever questioned really anything that I had ever said. And the moment we were about to leave home, we opened the door to the garage, and I tell them we're leaving now. And you could hear, you know, ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta everywhere. And she looks me right in the face. Baba, are you sure it's safe? Barefaced lie, I tell her it's safe. Everything is under control. Smile on her face, she totally believed, and we left. And that's kind of something that replays over and over again. I promised that I was going to keep it together this time, and I will. I will. So it's okay. No, it really is okay. But basically, the thing is, you know, I come from a position of, I think, great privilege. If it can happen to me, it really, really can happen to anyone. And the theme of today, all in, I think resounds with me a lot now, because I actually thought I was all in beforehand. I thought I was doing amazing. And I think 2 years down the road now, actually being displaced from home, the big thing for me is that being all in, it's kind of a conscious choice, not just doing what you can, but really committing to doing whatever it takes. And these are 2 very different things, and this is why all in really resounds big time with me. I'll leave it there.
We always say that when you see people walking and when you meet anyone, try and pay attention to what they come with. The personal stories that are being shared today has influenced how both my brother and my sister here show up not only for themselves, but show up for their organizations, show up for their families, and show up for the continent. What they're going to share next, now that you have a background on who they are as individuals, because get to know somebody from the heart. What drives them? What motivates them? What's their why? Understanding the why that has been shared here will now lead us into what has that looked like in terms of building what they've managed to build up today and what else is needed. So always spend time to know deeper the person next to you or the people that you serve with. I didn't introduce myself. My name is Dr. Sylvia Vito. I serve as the Africa head for Eva Pharma. Eva Pharma is a leading pharmaceutical organization out of Egypt. We manufacture medicines, anti-diabetics, anti-cancers, antihypertensives, anything. Throw a stone, you land on something we make. We've been in Africa for probably 104, but mainly in Egypt. Recently expanded into Sub-Saharan Africa, and Sudan is one of the markets that I support and that I lead. I'd barely joined Eva Pharma, and at that time, it was the end of 2022, set up on a big mission to set up local manufacturing in Africa. Sudan was a big market for us, turning over almost $70 million per year before the war. So we had established facilities, we had bought land, we're going to do local manufacturing for Sudan to supply what we call the Arabic Africa. April 2023, the war breaks out. I have a team of 110 individuals in Sudan, and we had to make a decision. What will Eva Pharma look like in the face of the war that was happening? What I want to share today, and it's how we show up as leaders, my CEO and myself, we made a deliberate decision that it doesn't matter. No single individual will be let go because of the war and because we have to repurpose what their roles are going to look like. Today, we still have 110 individuals fully employed by Eva Pharma in spite of the war. For us, it was very critical to understand that these individuals didn't have a choice. But at the end of the day, we also claim as a pharmaceutical organization that manufactures medicines that patients are truly at the center of everything else we do. And that should not be only when it's convenient or when it's easy. It has got to ring true even in the disruptions that we face. So since then, other than retaining the teams, we've managed to repurpose their roles to ensure that they can not only, because fortunately 90% of them are trained pharmacists, so finding out what more can we do to give them meaningful engagement and for them to be part of the structure that is rebuilding Sudan. So I'll share that much later, but beyond the role that I do, I actually serve at Amphora Coalition as the board chair, and that is a bit of why I'm here today.
Let's give it up for incredible African women, please. A big round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to go back to you, Islam, and ask, being at the intersection of culture, youth, and economic inclusion, please shed your light on how young people, artists, and grassroots entrepreneurs are adapting and creating amidst the war and socio-economic pressures that they're facing. What does solidarity, economies, and the models of informal innovation, what can we learn from them, and what do you see, and what more can be done?
It was such a hard question, man, because now we have to go into all the different things we had experienced. But I've never seen people that are more supportive of each other like the Sudanese people, to be honest. We survived the last 3 years together, through each other. Myself as an artist, as a Sudanese person who was displaced in Kenya, I have yet to meet an organization that they themselves are like, cool, we want to support artists. We want to allow them to bring their lives back together. So the only thing we really could do is support each other. So when we first came in here, there was a lot of artists that arrived in Nairobi. We worked together with the Ford Foundation to put together a grant to get a few musicians some of the instruments they had lost, and I think the innovation in our solidarity is something that everyone should learn from, right? Like in Sudan, no matter how many people you have over at home, you're cooking for everybody, right? You're feeding everyone. This idea of abundance is very deeply rooted in who we are. So now when we experience displacement, we realized, oh my God, like it is not that abundant out there. Even if our continent is the most incredibly rich place in the world, we are still like the poorest people. That's exhausting, right? But when artists start arriving, whether it's visual, musicians, basically we put funds together, you know, as people who are displaced, leaving countries, having lost everything. We are the ones putting our money together to help each other because nobody cares, to be honest. You know, this is from my personal experience. And those who care only care enough to an extent where they can get something back in return, right? And I always encourage a lot of people who want to support the cultural work and artistic work, don't expect your logo to be everywhere. Don't expect us to like go around and tell the whole world how incredible your organization is. You're supporting life, you're supporting humanity, you're supporting people just living, right? So there's so many things that are complicated and make it 10 times more challenging for us to recover because, for example, the simplest thing, health insurance. The most thing I was excited about my job is having health insurance. That is sad. That is so sad. Like in this time and age, I also come from a lot of privilege. My father, a civil servant, diplomat, incredible person, also lost his job because of the war. But there's so much that I had access to growing up that most people did not, right? So it is absolutely sad that the one thing I'm actually looking for is to be able to afford to go to a hospital and get my teeth checked out. So one thing we're doing right now is making sure that whether it's if we're building cooperatives or if we're building funds, every artist needs to have health insurance. Every human being is entitled to health insurance, guys. Like if we're not having these conversations, I don't know what we're doing, right? It can't be that we live in such a beautiful continent with so many incredibly smart people and you tell me I have to go spend like $500 to get my teeth fixed? As a refugee, that is, yeah. So what we do is we support each other. And so I think these models of solidarity, whether it's mutual aid or crowdfunding, all the emergency rooms running in Sudan, they're all really, a lot of it is the donations. I wish I could see a number of how much money Sudanese have sent to Sudan versus how much money organizations that is their duty to support Sudan have put into Sudan. You know, how much of that money goes into running your organization versus arriving to displaced people in Sudan, right? So I am so tired of not just nailing everything at the point, right? We have to keep explaining to everyone our pain and our agony and how much we've lost and how much, like, everything tells us there's no hope. Literally. There is not a single indicator that anyone can give me that tells me our future is going to be better. But somehow we have so much hope that we wake up, get out of bed, sit in a panel, and tell everyone about our experience, right? Because that's what hope looks like. And artists keep getting pushed out of the conversation on peace building and hope building and trust building. You know, Sudan's problem is not just war, Sudan's problem is a trust problem. We can't sit in the same room, look at each other, and like agree on something. We will fight, we will kill each other. Why? Because there's no trust. Artists, they build trust between people. You know, there's two places, sorry I'm just ranting, but there's two places in which I have seen people be joyful, expressive. One of them is at a concert. Whether you are Sef or Saf, nobody knows, you're dancing, you're singing. You are enjoying the music. Sorry, guys, I'm giving you my back. And the other thing is obviously soccer matches. Against you, of course, unless you're against this different team. But the way people come together, the way people talk to each other, the people agree is through culture. Music, soccer, you name it. So you can't talk to me about peace building without talking to me about how you're involving artists in your peace building process. That's it. Thank you.
Fantastic. And I'll segue the conversation to you, Ahmed. Where were you as a business before April 2023? Where are you now as a business? What is that journey like? How have you navigated this unprecedented circumstance? And what are some of the key decisions and principles that have helped you as a leader in your business and as a Sudanese to maintain the continuity for profit, yes, because it has to make business sense when so much is uncertain and so much is unpredictable. Please unpack this for us.
Thank you again, Sylvia. One thing I can start by saying, they definitely didn't teach us anything about this at business school at all. So, you know, we have to kind of make it up on the fly as we go along. So, yes, you know, of course, a very chaotic situation, unbelievable kind of unpredictability, lack of visibility. And for us in particular, the war started April 15th, and that is basically peak preparation time. So the main agricultural season in Sudan is early July. So, you know, we were very conscious of the fact that as a large player in the ag sector, in particular, a very important provider of agri-inputs and agri-technology to the sector, we had a kind of a critical decision to make. If we decided to pull out, it would have very serious consequences for that upcoming agricultural season and very serious consequences for food security in the country. And so, you know, we had to decide fast, decide without really knowing how things would look. And I think the decision that was taken was the only thing that would stop us would be safety, security. So that is kind of a decision that I delegated to people who are better informed than I am. So I would not take a final call on, you know, continue or stop when it's a safety, security issue. But everything else was put as secondary. Everything else meaning business considerations, profitability, etc., for that particular upcoming agricultural season. And so we kind of framed that, you know, our business has been operating in Sudan for 70 years. So since the year of Sudan's independence, we were not about to stop now when our, you know, business partners, the farmers really needed us. And so we kind of reinforced our commitment to the farming sector and that we would continue, come what may, that year supporting the farming community.
Thank you. And so that we can allow a few quick Q&As from the audience, because I know we are a mixed blend of many individuals from many countries with different experiences. Just start reflecting even as we take the questions from the audience. As someone who has personally experienced displacement, which is what we've shared today, how has this influenced how you do business as a private sector leaders? Because you show up differently. So as we take the Q&A, I want you to close with that comment of how it has shaped you as a leader and how you show up not only for yourself, for your family, but for the businesses that you now lead and the ones you're going to lead in the future. I don't know whether we have questions in the audience before we take just a closing commentary.
Come on, we're not going to bite. You guys are thinking so much.
I can't see, so if somebody could assist me. There we go. So I'll try, help me.
Thank you. Okay. I'm Chalo Ali, Sudanese from Nuba Mountains, South Kordofan. 26 years refugee. Islam, thank you for what you are doing as an artist. I was in Darfur, Chad, last year. I happened to visit the refugees camps in Chad. I saw very terrible things that are happening in those refugees, especially for the Sudanese who are in Chad. What are you doing as an artist to make sure that you reach to these people? People are psychologically completely tortured. They need help. What are you doing to help these people? Dr. Vito, health situation there is there. People are dying every 30 minutes, the child is dying. What are you doing with all the production you have in Egypt to make sure whatever you're producing reaches the right people?
Good challenge. Do you want to take it on?
Powerful question. I think as artists, like what we're doing right now in a lot of the concerts that we organize is we host these fundraisers, basically. The last one we did, we raised very little, like $700, but not even intentionally. And those go to community kitchens in different like refugee camps, supporting the community kitchens, but also a lot of us and a lot of group of friends, like powerful artist called Wadabo, he always goes to camps to perform there. So now we're trying to organize a series of performances in different camps, just so people can dance, really, that's it. And people can laugh and just get a little sense of life again. So the only thing I can do as an artist is to ensure that all the platforms we're on, all the events we're hosting, is that a big chunk of the proceedings or the money that we generate go to these community spaces. But in reality, we don't need to do that. You know, there's a lot of other people who have a lot of resources that should just be like, guys, which community kitchens shall we support? Community kitchens is how Sudanese are surviving right now, you know. So thank you so much for this question. And power to you and to your people, one of the most incredible and powerful people, incredibly marginalized for as long as we know, the Nuba Mountains. Music in the Nuba Mountains, hey, culture, forget it. So thank you so much, and I hope that life gives you butterflies and roses and a lot of money and happiness. Thank you.
Wow. And maybe just to answer your question in just a simple way, as Eva farmer across sub-Saharan Africa, and I lead about 32 markets, we donate 15% of our products that we supply goes into what we call community investments. Community investments will vary from country to country. In countries like South Sudan, for example, we directly supply that into where the camps are, where the displaced people find themselves, even the locals. I mean, we also have a lot of IDPs within Sudan. I'll check whether, I don't know which reference point you have for Chad, because we are present in Chad as well, and we do also supply 15% of all our products for free as donations for community investment. But of course, sometimes based on the implementing partners that we are using in the country, it might not reach some of the areas that you're talking to, but I'm more than happy to get the feedback and see what more can be done, because you are the eyes and ears, because we can't be everywhere, but we're open to know what more we can do better. But we've got a straight commitment, 15% of revenue goes into community investment as free donations of critical medicines in every country where we operate. Each of you can make a difference in every space where you find yourselves. But remember to know the personal story of the people that you serve with, the people that you work with, the people that you live with, because that's what inspires the why and how we show up for one another and for the continent. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Our thoughts remain with the people of Sudan. And with that, we've come to the end of today's episode of State of Africa. We'd love to hear from you. Join the conversation on Aladi's social media platforms. Until next time, I'm Jeff Morton. Goodbye.